I'm Imani Daniels, and this is my POP3 and SMTPS presentation for Cyber 4220. POP3 stands for the Post Office Protocol version 3. POP3 is used for mail that is transferred over the internet. This protocol gets emails from a server and then sends them back to a local client. POP3 is a one-way protocol, meaning that it is only used on incoming emails. The Post Office Protocol is currently on version 3. Using the POP3 protocol, you can download emails from the server, which opens the capability of reading emails offline. After an email has been downloaded, depending on the protocol specifications, the email on the server can get removed, saved for a specific time period, or it can be allowed to be downloaded by others. POP3 comes pre-installed onto most email applications and will work if the application has been set up to host POP3. For POP3 to connect to email servers, there is an address associated with each POP3 server that must be attached to the email program if you would like to connect to it. You must also authenticate your email before you can receive email or look at any data that's come through to that server. In certain browsers, POP3 is built in, so you can essentially check your email without needing a client to do so. The way POP3 email is delivered is as follows. The user would send an email. That email then gets sent to the SMTP server. From the SMTP server, it's then sent to the DNS server. Once the DNS server gets it, it's then uploaded to the internet. The internet then sends the email to the associated domain, in which the domain then sends that to the MTA server. The MTA server locates the user account, and the user account then sends the email to the receiver via IMAP and POP. This is a diagram depicting the steps in which an email is received. We first start with the email being created and a send command has been initiated. That send command is then sent to the SMTP server. From this SMTP server, it is sent to the DNS server. If the emails aren't being sent to the same DNS server, it will then look up that DNS address. The DNS server then sends this email to the internet. That email reaches the domain of the recipient after it's been looked up. The MTA server then transfers the email to the correct user account, and from that user's account, it's communicated with the recipient via IMAP and POP3, and the receiver can then view that email once they've been authenticated to view the data inside of it. POP3 operates on 2 ports as a default. Port 110, which is non-encrypted, and port 995, which is a secure port. Once POP3 is started, it then listens to this TCP on port 110. Once this port has received a request to get an email, it will create a connection with the TCP server host. Once the server host connection is created, it will then move to authentication. In the transaction state, the client itself and the server go back and forth until the request has been completed. Once the quest is then completed, POP3 then will release any resources that it received while it was doing the transaction, and the TCP connection that was created or established for the request is then closed, and the server deletes the message. The advantages and disadvantages of POP3. An advantage of POP3 is that it's been upgraded and has a couple versions in the past. Which makes POP3 widely loved is that it is simple to use and opens the capability for emails to be received with the least number of errors possible. Another great thing about POP3 is that it makes sending and getting emails in bulk easier and allows for the access of emails offline. The downside to POP3 is that it wasn't meant to handle any sort of tampering when it came to emails on a server. This is because the intent for emails on a POP3 server is that it's retrieved, downloaded, and then the data is deleted. In order to get around this, you would have to use a more difficult IMAP protocol. POP3 also doesn't have the resources to check an already existing connection for mail updates. So if you're connected to an email and you're waiting for somebody to send an email back through to you, POP3 doesn't check that. It would have to send a whole new request to retrieve that email. It also doesn't support having multiple folders on the server. You would also need to use IMAP to have access to these features. POP3 and SMTPS. SMTP stands for Simple Mail Text Protocol. This is what handles outgoing mail versus POP3 that only handles incoming mail. SMTP moves email across the internet. Once an email has been sent across the internet by SMTP, it is then read using POP3 or IMAP. SMTP gets used twice, where POP3 only gets used once, in the email transaction. It gets used once when it goes to establish a connection, and then again when it begins to send information between the two servers of sender and receiver. SMTP is the only protocol that is specifically for sending emails that most email providers rely on to send emails. SMTP ports handle the execution of data transfer as it moves from one place to another. Once a user has executed the send email request, a connection is then created between the SMTP server and a TCP, which is the text-for-text protocol. After the SMTP tells the server what it should do with the data and other information like the sender or receiver's email and the content of the email. Once an email has been told to the MTA or the message transfer agent, it then looks to see if the email that's being sent has a common email domain. If the email sender and receiver have a common email domain, the email will be sent immediately. If not, the SMTP server will then contact the DNS server to get the receiver's domain and then send it to the right place. So these are SMTPS commands. So HELO, this command is what the client uses to announce itself to the SMTP server. Mail from is a command that prompts the sender to provide a code that tells you where or who the mail is coming from. RCPT2, after the mail from command has been initiated and the server responds with a 250 OK code, the RCTP2 code is used to know who the receiver is. Data. This moves any message data to the SMTP server and gives out a 345 reply code. This also starts the movement of data with the client and the server. Once the data command has been sent, the email is already on its way to the receiver. RSET. When you need to cancel a transaction, this command clears everything and will get rid of any data involving both parties. The connection, however, will stay open. This usually gets used when you accidentally send an email to the wrong person or you filled out an email with the wrong information. SMTPS can have certain error codes. Two of the most common ones are 4 followed by any two numbers and 5 followed by any two numbers. 4 followed by any two numbers is the persistent transient failure code. This means that there's a failure or down in the mail server. Simply reusing the command can get past this, but you are typically getting this error in response to keeping any unauthorized senders away. 5 followed by any two numbers is the permanent error code. This means that your SMTP connection has failed or has been dropped. Any subsequent attempts at re-establishing this connection will commonly fail. Running your own SMTPS. The option you have when creating an SMTP server are using a third party or running it yourself. Running an SMTP server has both its pros and cons. When you set up your own SMTPS, you don't have a limit on how many emails you can send across your server, or many other providers do. Having your own server means you can also watch your email delivery in higher detail, which includes analyzing any error codes and anything that may happen along the way. On your own server, the people you choose to add to your email list becomes private to you and only you. When using an outside server, that email list can be shared with others. This helps strengthen security on your own server versus using a provided server. The cons to running your own SMTPS. means that the server will take a lot of time and effort. In some cases, this also costs a fair amount of money to start and maintain. The need to constantly monitor your servers or hire someone to do so can take a lot of resources that you may not have. Any natural disaster can affect your servers, since setting up your own makes it local. You are then prone to downtime on the server in accordance with power outages and any other nature-related things that can cause downtime. As your server grows and changes, the server has to as well. As your email volume gets bigger, you might notice more dropped emails and must find fixes to any other issues that may occur as your needs change. The upsides to using a provider are that if using a provided in SMTP, this reduces the amount of involvement you have in maintaining your SMTP server. Anything that happens to it isn't on you, but on your provider to fix. Considering that you don't have to interact with the server yourself, this means that using a provider makes it more cost efficient, especially if you are constantly using your email or that is a big part of your business. Third-party providers tend to be more secure in that they offer several backup solutions to keep the server safe and limit the loss of data. They also must uphold the latest security measures, which is something you can always count on. Most providers can also be held up to making sure that your mail is constantly delivered. This cannot be said for those who create their own SMTP. The cons to third-party SMTP is if you don't want to rely on other people, you can end up running into complications on your server because you have to wait for correspondence from them before you can move forward. In major businesses, this can create a lot of issues. A big thing with using a third party is that these providers can have specific terms and conditions that you must adhere to in order to use their service. This means that they can specify specific conditions such as email limits and how long an email is stored and when information is deleted. And this is my reference page. Thank you.